The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation.
You won't believe the kind of headlines that have been flooding social media lately. Whispers, speculation, and explosive claims that have left fans completely stunned. It all started when reports began circulating about a supposed connection that many never expected to hear linked to Melania Trump, and just when the internet thought it had seen it all. A public statement surfaced that turned everything upside down. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about confirming what's true or false. This is about the storm of reports, the noise, and the reactions that followed. Because as soon as these claims started trending, emotions ran high. Fans were shocked. Comment sections exploded. And suddenly, everyone had an opinion. According to these circulating reports, Melania Trump allegedly stepped forward to deny any connection to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But what really caught everyone's attention wasn't just the denial, it was the timing, it's the tone, and the tension surrounding it. People began asking questions. Why now? What sparked this sudden response? And is there more happening behind the scenes than we're being told? Online discussions quickly turned into heated debates. Some voices defended her strongly, insisting this was nothing more than baseless speculation. Others weren't so convinced, pointing to past controversies and demanding deeper answers.
I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence. My polite reply to her email doesn't amount to anything more than a trivial note. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in detail in my book, Melania. The first time I crossed paths with Epstein was in the year 2000 at an event Donald and I attended together. At the time, I had never met Epstein and had no knowledge of his criminal undertakings. Numerous fake images and statements about Epstein and me have been circulating on social media for years now. Be cautious about what you believe. These images and stories are completely false. I'm not a witness or a named witness in connection with any of Epstein's crimes. My name has never appeared in court documents.
For answers. The divide was instant and intense. Behind the scenes, insiders, at least according to these same reports, hint at rising pressure, uncomfortable conversations, and a growing need to address the narrative before it spirals even further. And just like that, what started as a few whispers turned into a full-blown media frenzy. But here's where things take an even more dramatic turn. Because the statement itself may have silenced some critics, but it also opened the door to a whole new wave of questions. And as this story continues to unfold in headlines and discussions, one thing is certain: this is far from over. The moment those reports began spreading, the atmosphere around Melania shifted in a way no one could ignore. It wasn't just another headline buried under the endless scroll of trending stories. This one felt heavier, more charged. Almost like it carried an unspoken tension that people could sense even before reading the details. Fans were shocked. Critics were quick to react, and suddenly, everyone seemed to be watching her every move more closely than ever before. Behind the scenes, according to these circulating narratives, the situation was far from calm. Voices close to the story claimed there was an urgency building, a pressure that had been quietly growing until it reached a breaking point. One insider was quoted in these reports saying, "This didn't come out of nowhere. There have been whispers for a while, but now it's louder than ever." Whether that's true or not, the effect was undeniable. Emotions ran high, and the public couldn't look away. What truly fueled the fire was the alleged public statement itself. People weren't just reacting to what was said, but how it was said. Some described it as firm and direct. Others claimed it carried a tone of frustration, as if it had been forced by the weight of speculation. "I have nothing to do with these claims," the statement reportedly conveyed. And yet, instead of settling things, it seemed to spark even more questions. Social media turned into a battlefield almost instantly. One side rallied in defense, arguing that the reports were nothing more than exaggerated rumors blown out of proportion. "This is exactly how misinformation spreads," one user wrote, echoing a sentiment shared by many who believed the entire narrative was unfair. But on the other side, skepticism grew stronger. People began digging into past timelines, old appearances, and anything they thought could connect dots, whether those dots were real or imagined, in private circles. As described by these same reports, conversations became tense. People close to the situation were said to be divided, unsure of how to respond or what to believe. One voice allegedly remarked, "It's not just about denying it. It's about how the public sees it now." That line alone seemed to capture the heart of the issue. Because in moments like these, perception often becomes more powerful than facts. Then came another twist that kept the drama alive. New discussions began surfacing, suggesting that the timing of the statement might be linked to something bigger. Some claimed it was a strategic move to get ahead of a narrative before it spiraled out of control. Others insisted it was simply a reaction to the sudden spike in attention. But either way, the timing raised eyebrows. "Why now?" became the question, echoing across platforms. It wasn't just asked once or twice. It became a recurring theme, repeated in videos, comments, and discussions that seemed to grow more intense with every passing hour. And with each repetition, the tension only deepened. Meanwhile, fans who had followed Melania for years found themselves caught in an emotional tug-of-war. Some refused to entertain the idea that there could be any truth behind the reports. "This doesn't match what we know," one supporter commented passionately. But others admitted feeling uncertain, not because they believed the claims outright, but because the situation itself felt unsettling in the midst of all this. The media coverage, at least as described in these narratives, began to take on a life of its own. Headlines became more dramatic, discussions more heated, and the line between reporting and speculation seemed to blur. One commentator even said, "It's like watching a reality show unfold in real time," capturing the almost surreal nature of how quickly everything escalated. And then there were the alleged private reactions. According to some reports, individuals connected to the broader circle were not entirely on the same page. Disagreements surfaced, not necessarily about the truth of the claims, but about how they should be handled. Staying silent isn't an option anymore, one source supposedly stated, hinting at the growing pressure to address the situation head-on. That pressure, as described, didn't just come from the public. It came from within as well. The need to control the narrative, to shape how the story was being told, became increasingly urgent. And yet, despite the statement, despite the attempts to clarify, the noise didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder. There were even suggestions that behind closed doors, emotions were far more intense than what the public could see. Frustration, concern, and a sense of being misunderstood were all reportedly part of the mix. One insider allegedly shared, "It's exhausting. No matter what is said,
The positions victim statements, or FBI interviews surrounding the Epstein matter. I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island. I have never been legally accused or convinced of a crime in connection with Epstein's sex trafficking, abuse of minors, and other repulsive behavior. The false smears about me from mean-spirited and politically motivated individuals and entities looking to cause damage to my good name, to gain financially and climb politically, must stop. My attorneys and I have fought these unfounded and baseless lies with success and will continue to maintain my sound reputation without hesitation. To date, several individuals and companies have been legally obligated to publicly apologize and retract their lies about me, such as Daily Beast, James Carville, and HarperCollins, UK. Now is the time for Congress to act. Epstein was not alone. Several prominent male executives resigned from their powerful positions after this matter became widely politicized. Of course, this doesn't amount to guilt, but we still must work openly and transparently to uncover the truth. I call on Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes, and then her testimony should be permanently entered into the congressional record. Then, and only then, we will have the truth. Thank you.
That was First Lady Melania Trump at the White House making a public statement saying that the lies and smears linking me to Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. She denies ever having any involvement or knowledge in the late convicted sex offender's crimes, saying that she never had a relationship with him or with Ghislaine Maxwell, saying that Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump, the president. She says that they met by chance in 1998, notably ending her statement with a call to action to Congress.
Yeah, that there should be a public hearing centered around the survivors, that every woman should have her day to tell her story in public. Let's go, and this is a photo, obviously, from years and years ago, where you see the Trumps with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Let's go to Kristen Holmes, who is at the White House. This is quite an extraordinary thing, an appearance by the First Lady batting down any sort of suggestions of this kind of thing and social media talking about this kind of association, Kristen.
Yeah, Brandon, Boris, I would use the word stunning here, particularly as it pertains to this First Lady. She is often not in the limelight. She doesn't take to center stage. She doesn't react to things like this, standing there at the podium. And these remarks kind of came out of the blue. It's a time when we're actually not focusing on Epstein. The country seemingly had moved on to the latest issue that is coming out of this administration, which of course is the war in Iran. Yet we have Melania Trump coming up here and essentially defending her name. And we should note there were a lot of smears across social media linking her to Epstein. None of it seemed verified. We don't need to repeat any of those claims, although she does list them out somewhat during that speech regarding meeting Donald Trump, her relationship with Epstein. But even further, the fact that she is calling on Congress for an open hearing for these victims and survivors to provide their testimony. We have to compare that to what we have been hearing from President Trump, from the White House, from the Attorney General Pam Bondi before she left, talking about how America wants to move on from this, how they don't want to have these hearings, they don't want to draw this out, how people in the country are tired of talking about Epstein. You have a direct contradiction to that with the First Lady here. So yes, you have her defending herself, but she is also calling for what so many people across America have been calling for, which is a chance for these victims, for these survivors to come forward and speak on the record, speak to Congress. And she is actually calling on Congress to let them have this day in court. Obviously, court is metaphorical here, talking about Congress, but saying that everyone should have to testify under oath, talking about how men have lost their jobs because of their relationships to Epstein, saying that, of course, it doesn't make you guilty of anything, but it should be an opportunity to have the survivors talk, the victims talk, to get their side of the story out there. This, again, is completely the opposite of what we had been hearing in terms of the narrative and trying to get away from the narrative around Jeffrey Epstein, and coming from the First Lady in this kind of impassioned speech where she is directly addressing these claims, again, mostly claims that have been seen on social media. She names a few news outlets that had carried some of this, and then going into a call to action to even take this further, re-injecting the Jeffrey Epstein saga back into the media narrative and essentially saying Congress didn't do enough. That is such a stunning and stark departure from what we have been hearing, and to be given again by the First Lady standing there at the White House.
Yeah, notable, Kristen, in part because of this disagreement between the DOJ and the House Oversight Committee as to whether or not now former Attorney General Pam Bondi should testify and follow the subpoena to get her to testify. That was the last news we'd heard on the Epstein saga.